Good morning.
Morning, good morning. You know, the sponsors is John Graham. Who will be the John Schultz Graham. Just about just record. It's the recorders. Cue the host here. It does, it's got somebody else on the front. No, it's got just a second here. Just a second. Do that one. All right. Rolling off. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
The Erev Shabbos. Parsha Shlach. So we are all aware the central piece of the Parsha. Moshe sends the Meraglim, the spies, and they come back with
mixed news. And the terms very negative. They speak slanderous language about the land of Israel. And they are doomed, and the whole generation with them, that they will not come to the land of Israel, but they will die in the desert. And that it's a Yom L'Shana, for every day that the spies, 40 days that they were in the land of Israel. So that turns into 40 years in the desert. Now, the Parsha explained that every day was a day of Lashon Hara. Every day you see what you want to see, and they saw. So one day they saw giants, one day saw a lot of funerals, one day saw fruit that is extraordinary. So every day was a day of slander. Because it depends what you see. It's all in the eyes of the beholder. We all know that Lawrence Sanhedrin teaches us that if there are two witnesses to an event and they both say exactly the same thing, then you know that you have false testimony. Because two people that see an event don't see it exactly the same. Because the person seeing the event is reflected in how one relates the event. And that is a true lesson in life, that everyone sees things the way they want to see it. So that's the Parsha of the Meraglim. So we're all aware of that. After the Parsha of the Meraglim, there's another Parsha in the Torah that the Jewish people, when they heard that they're not going to the land of Israel, by Ashkimu Baboker, they get up the next morning and they say, we're going anyway. Parsha of the Ma'apili. They're going to force themselves into the land. Moshe tells them, don't go. Vihi lo titzlach, Moshe says. This time you will not be successful. And they say, we're going to go anyway. Don't be pessimistic that we will be successful. Moshe tells them that Kaviyachol, the Rabboni Shalom, is not with them in this. They ignore Moshe. They attempt to go, that's the Ma'apili. They force themselves in. And they are routed by the Canaanites. Now, this remains one of the most mysterious parshas in the Torah. What did they think? What did Moshe tell them? Why were they routed? I mean, this is the basis of what we call tshuva, right? They repent. Yesterday they said, we don't want to go. They were informed that that was a sin. So today they do tshuva, today they repent. And they say, okay, we're not only are we going, we're going to Damska go. We're going to push it. So, you're faced with the same situation, the same set of circumstances that the person sinned before. Now the person finds himself or herself or themselves in the same exact set of circumstances. And they have heard the report of the spies. They've absorbed all the negativity already. and they say, no, we're going to go anyway. V'yesh lachem tshuva gdola mizot. Can there be any greater tshuva than this? And yet, Moshe tells them, don't go. And when they do go anyway, so then they are defeated. So it's a very enigmatic parsha. Very strange to understand what happened. We have a similar parallel idea, famous medrash, that before Yetzias Mitzrayim, before the Jewish people left Egypt, the tribe of Ephraim tried to burst out into freedom on its own. And they went into the desert, they got out, and they went 3 days in the desert, and they didn't have water, and they didn't have food, and they died in the desert. The famous Gemara teaches us that these were the skeletons, they were the skeletons of the dry bones that Yechezkel revived in his famous vision, Asichieno Atzomo Soele, and that they were all revived. So there, I mean, why should they believe Moshe? Moshe told them, we're going on a Mitzrayim. So, and they went. So then again, why should they suffer that fate? And it would take 1,000 years for them to be restored, so to speak. 1,000 years later, Yechezkel will revive them. The famous Gemara that what happened to them afterwards. So there's one opinion, they got up on their feet, Omru Shira, and they said praises of God, and they all dropped dead again. But a revival was a short one. And the other opinion, the Gemara says, Omad Rabbi Yehuda ben Pseira al Raglav, the great Rabbi Yehuda ben Pseira stood on his feet, and he said, Chas v'chalila, to say such a thing, that they all dropped dead again. V'alo ani mibnei b'neihem, I am descended from them. They got married, they had children, they lived a normal life. I'm descended from them. Utfilin shalavi abo biyodi, and I have my Zayda's tefillin in my hand to prove it. I have their tefillin in my hand. Just a diversion. I heard on the news yesterday. I listened to the news very sparingly. I find that it is very helpful for my blood pressure and my state of mind not to know everything that's going on. I didn't even know that we have a new government. Anyhow, on the news yesterday, there was a school of Pardes Chana, very progressive secular school. So, in honor of yesterday, So they had the rainbow multicolored flag flying in the school. So everybody said, yeah, well, that's, freedom of expression. Then somebody brought a Palestinian flag. Since we're going to have Arabs in the government, so that's also freedom of expression. But then somebody brought a pair of film to exhibit to the students, and that they did not allow. That's not freedom of expression. It's religious coercion. And the one that brought the film, the parents said, but we wanted our children to know that at least, for 3,000 years, Jews have been putting on these boxes. So no, it's not. Not allowed. So, the Meraglim are alive and well. They have not disappeared from our midst. But in any event, he said, I have my Zayda's tefillin on from those. I've often said that that really is the description of our time. We're not arguing the two opinions. Jews that witnessed the revival of the Jewish people, but they got up and they sang the songs and then they all dropped dead again. There are Jews that, realizing the revival of the Jewish people, married, had families, and had their Zaydas too, that those choices remain. So in any event, that's a parallel story. Why were they destroyed? And why were these people destroyed? After all, they did good things. They wanted to do good things. They wanted to leave Mitzrayim. They wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. They want to do tshuva. So there are a few important lessons here that Mefarshim point out to us that should be taken into consideration. Tshuva, we have a superficial understanding of what tshuva could do. What tshuva does is may restore the sinner. The person did something very evil. Let's say the person slandered somebody else. And then he regrets it. And he says he's sorry. And he pledges never to do it again. And he does not do it again. So he has met the requirements of tshuva. But he has not erased, because it is impossible to do so, the consequences of the first slander. That remains. I can do tshuva for my sin, but I cannot erase the consequences that flowed from that sin and affected others. We see it in so many instances in life. The parent does tshuva, but he can't fix up the child anymore. So they come to go to Eretz Yisrael. So they think that by their voluntary will to be the Mapirim, and they're going to go there to Israel, and they're going to force the issue that somehow everything is going to be good. It's not. Moshe says he wrote it. It cannot be good because the effect of what happened yesterday cannot be erased. The Jewish people will never look at Eretz Yisrael the same again. That's what the Meraglim did. They'll never view it the same. They'll always say, Eretz Acheles Yoshveli. They'll always say there's someplace better to live, which is the Jewish story for thousands of years. And it's the Jewish story today. Somebody called me up last week. And he asked me why don't Jewish communities in the exile see the necessity for encouraging Aliyah? Why is it, so to speak, not even discussed in the schools as an option? So I'm supposed to know why, right? So I said to him, you know why? Because of the Meraglim. He said, what are you talking about? The Meraglim was 3,000 years ago. I said, exactly. They planted the seed that's still there. The seed that Eretz Yisrael is not really good. And we'll find 100 reasons for why it's not good. Religious reasons, political reasons, economic reasons, climate, whatever you want. That's what the Meraglim did. So when the Meraglim come to do tshuva, the Mapilim, they're doing tshuva. They're going to go to Gan Eden. They're Bali tshuva. But the effect of their slander will never go away. The effect of the sin always remains. That tshuva does not erase. But tshuva does not change events. They change people, but not events. And because of that, therefore, Moshe said, "V'hilo titzlach." Listen, you're going to go, etc. This is not the way it's going to be. It's not going to help. The only thing that will help is God will take you in, and it'll have to be almost miraculous, and you'll have no choices. Then Yoshua will take you in, then you'll go. But now you can't. Now it's not going to happen. You haven't got the right attitude. That's a very deep, even disturbing understanding of the situation. And that's the same thing that happened with the Jews that went from Egypt prematurely. The Jews liked Egypt. You see it throughout the desert. Let's go back to Egypt. Oh, what a good pickle we had. It was delicious. Hard to get a good pickle in Israel. Still today. Not a good pickle, you gotta go to Gus on the Lower East Side. You got a good pickle. So that remains with us until today, Egypt. Egypt's always better. So it says, Hashem Elokeinu miMitzrayim b'yod chazaka v'zohar l'tuya. So we always think of the Yod Chazaka, the Zohar Netuya against the Egyptians, which is true. But it's also against the Jews. I took you out screaming and kicking. That's Moshe has to contend with that the whole time that in the desert. Now there's a famous Hasidic word here on the Mapilim by Reb Tzodek HaKohen of Lublin, the great Reb Tzodek, in his Sefer Tzidkas HaTzadik. I think it's Simon Mem Vov. He says as follows. Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people, Vehi lo tzitzmu. Vehi means now. Now you will not be successful. You want to go now, immediately after, not going to go. It's not going to be successful. But he says, the Gemara says that at the time of the beginning of the redemption of the Jewish people, chutzpah yazgid, chutzpah will triumph over everything. Everything will be chutzpah. So he says, chutzpah yazgid apilu klapi shmaya. Chutzpah will help even against heaven. The Jewish people will say, we don't care what heaven says. And he says there'll be another time of Ma'apilim, that the Jewish people will force their way into Eretz Yisrael. And Vehi lo titzloch. Now you weren't successful, but later on you will be successful. Later on, it will work. And that it concludes, that's in our time. He died 1905, when Jews were coming back there to Israel. That means the footsteps of the Messianic era, when the chutzpah of the Jews will finally work. They'll go back against, not only against the world, they'll go back against, so to speak, heaven. Now, that's pretty radical for a Chassidish Rebbe to say. So the Chassidim, when they reprinted the Tzidkas HaTzadik, they committed it, which is, except 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there was a Jew here in Yerushalayim, Eliyahu Kitov, Mokatovsky. He wrote the Sefer Parsha, Shubeito, he was a great Jew, a great orator. I heard him speak once in Chicago. It was just electric. I was more authority still existed. People came, believe it or not, people came to hear people speak. They wanted to hear somebody had to speak for an hour and a half, otherwise it wasn't worth it. I was invited many years ago to be a scholar in residence in the shul, Shabbos. And the rabbi called me up Friday, and he said, we have two rules. He said, you have to speak in Hebrew, and you can't speak longer than 10 minutes. So I told him it's really one rule, because my Hebrew can only last for 10 minutes. But I would say that you have to, why only 10 minutes? Maybe somebody has something worthwhile to say. So because of that, Munkatovsky reprinted the Tzidkas Hatzadik, and he called it Tzidkas Hatzadik Hamole, the full Tzidkas Hatzadik, and he put it back in. And since then, there have been numerous reprints, and the entire paragraph has been reinserted. So that's his description. His description is that our generation is the generation of the Ma'apili. We're trying to change the consequences, not just the people. And therefore, we are willing to force ourselves into it. And we're willing to absorb the fact that the world will say it's not nice. It's not without cost, not without sacrifice. So Moshe said, "Vihi lo titzlach." Now it won't be matzliach, but it will be matzliach later. The Mapilim have a place in Jewish history. And I always thought that it was very interesting that the illegal refugees who came to the land of Israel right after the Shoah and tried to run the British blockade, 30,000 Jews that were interned on Cyprus, they called themselves the Ma'apili. They were the Neshama of the Mapilim of old. So Eretz Yisrael is conquered, so to speak, only by the Mapilim. Against all odds, with chutzpah, even chutzpah against them. And I think that if we have such a view of it, a lot of what goes on doesn't necessarily make sense, but it doesn't disturb us. It's all part of the process. It's all part of what Moshe said was going to happen. The danger of slandering Eretz Yisrael remains. Great sins in see in American Jewry and other, you say here, you don't need American Jewry. You need the hearts. Begin said that the only government in Israel that Haaretz favored was the British mandate. That's the Atzas Meragli. It's the Erev Rav. That's everything that's gone wrong. And because of that, therefore, we live in exciting times. These are lessons that we should absorb. That it can be that they left Egypt early and they left without the faith they should have, but 1,000 years later they'll be revived. Somebody will come yet and wear their tefillin. That really is the Jewish story. And that's how it's outlined in this one little parsha, the Chumash. But when you take the parsha and apply it to life, you see how the Torah speaks to us directly. This shiur, by the way, was sponsored by John and Phyllis Graham, friends of mine. I thank them for so doing. Everyone should have a wonderful Shabbat, and we hear the news one from the other. Thank you.